or Nigel Smith. Nigel Smith. So there was some representation at a relatively lower level. But in terms of the involvement of the PS in the administrative aspect of it, and the director, there was no such involvement. So we were surprised when the director came to the public and tried to quell the issue with his report, trying to mitigate or give reasons. Some of them, obviously, reasons that cannot stand up to public scrutiny. Reasons why there was overspending here. In fact, in excess of 50 million of the amounts budgeted. In fact, one of the contracts that was actually doubled is the one for C.O. Williams, which moved from 27 million to approximately 54 million. It's virtually double. And he, Madam Speaker, tried to justify what happened in that case and to give the public the impression that they got good value for money. Now, Madam Speaker, we then decided to get an engineer in. And we got a very respectable and qualified engineer. And I'd prefer to leave the name anonymous, but to say that this particular engineer, Madam Speaker, is also a director of public works in a neighboring island, someone who has extensive experience dealing with these issues, and someone, Madam Speaker, who also presided over the development of a stadium in his country, so that this person is integrally involved in this type of work. And after, Madam Speaker, we got the report from our engineer, a copy that we could make available to the honorable members. In fact, this report, Madam Speaker, is on taken sides. So this is not a fictitious report as indicated by the member for Rural North. This is real. This is a real assessment that was done by a human being who is eminently qualified, someone who went in there, did the work, took all the photos. In fact, he has given us tangible evidence. Whereas the Director of Public Works gave us a lot of subjective information. This engineer went in there and gave us tangible information supported by photographs. And as they say, Madam Speaker, a picture tells 1,000 words. Now, in his report, Madam Speaker, which was done on February 27, 2008, he indicated the chain of command in relation to the construction at the stadium to be Ambassador Shaul as the coordinator, Mr. Sheehan Samuel, engineer, venue development coordinator, Mr. Nigel Smith, the engineer who is representing Public Works. And he says here, Madam Speaker, Ambassador Shaul, while one might not have the direct involvement in contracts, administration, and issue of contracts, which is not necessarily the case, because clearly in the letter, Madam Speaker, he said that he was putting certain proposals to C.O. Williams, which indeed was a contract. He says here that the project coordinator, such individual, is fully aware of activities.
Madam Speaker, on a point of order.
And is expected.
On a point of order, Madam Speaker. I do not think
What's
that...
the point of order?
Madam Speaker, if the member is going to speak to a specific document, I think the author of the document which is being presented to this honorable House should be made public, because here is a serious motion we're dealing with, and thorough research must be done into this author to ensure that the credibility which the member has placed in the author exists. And as a member of this House, Madam Speaker, I would love to know who the author of the report is and how soon can we be furnished with a copy of the report.
Honourable Member, I'm actually in the process of going through my standing orders to see whether we can allow this report to be quoted from from an anonymous source. I'm thinking that this is a serious, it's anonymous to us.
Madam Speaker, I'll give you the name. The name of the engineer who has a master's degree in civil engineering is a gentleman by the name of Calvin Pemberton. Calvin Pemberton.
And you will please make copies of that report available.
No problem, Madam Speaker. Anyway.
Because as it stands now, you realize this is just somebody's opinion.
Madam Speaker, I am giving you the opinion of our engineer.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So he says here, Madam Speaker, that Ambassador Shaul, as the coordinator, obviously would have been involved in the change of the scope of works, which has financial implications and must be discussed at the meeting which the project coordinator chairs. So, for instance, Nigel Smith, the engineer representing Public Works, had no such authority. So, for those who argue, including Mr. Charles Red Barry Davis, that Ambassador Shaul had no involvement, that is absolute nonsense, Madam Speaker. The reality is, he was integrally involved in the process. I think what they're confusing, Madam Speaker, is that he may not have been involved in the administrative arrangements effecting the contract, but in terms of the decision, Madam Speaker, awarding the contracts and varying the scope of work, he had to have presided over that as the chair, Madam Speaker. I see the Honourable Member for St. John's Rural West is getting animated. But the reality is, Madam Speaker, if he had no role, then why was he appointed as the coordinator? Coordinate what? What was his role? And I hope when the member for St. John's Rural West speaks, that you will tell the nation what role did Ambassador David Shaul played in this project, considering that he was appointed the chairman of the intergovernmental group that presided over these works. So was he just a figurehead? And if that is the case, if it wasn't David Shaul, then who authorized the scope of work and the change in the scope of work and the payments? And even if, Madam Speaker, assuming that Ambassador David Shaul had no such locus, then why did he write this letter to C.O. Williams on the 20th of January 2006 indicating certain proposals, to use his word, Madam Speaker? Then he had no such locus. Why did he write that letter? And I want to put it to the members on the other side that Ambassador David Shaul must have been integrally involved. And by the way, Madam Speaker, I believe that his appointment in the first instance represented a conflict. In fact, Ambassador David Shaul, as an ambassador, should be dealing with diplomatic relations, not a project, capital project. And there's some other issues too in terms of his appointment to China as well, whether or not that particular process may not have not been abused from time to time. But Madam Speaker,
let's stick to the motion.
Continuing on the report from the engineer, Madam Speaker, he says here, for instance, that the C.O. Williams contract moved from $27 to $54 million. And according to him, this is concern, major concern, if not at a minimum curiosity, as to how this price has jumped from $27 to $54 million. And he says here that we ought to know what, how, and why they need to be examined. And this, Madam Speaker, as I go through this report, you would recognize that there is indeed a need for some form of independent inquiry into this spending. Because at the end of the day, the nation did not get good value for money. Now, Madam Speaker, he continues that all of which must be measured against the initial scope of works, associated costs, and the change in the scope of work. And he says too that there should be change all the documentation on the file to determine the accuracy and the appropriateness. Now, Madam Speaker, he also went on to say that the documentation to substantiate agreed bill of quantities and unit rates that was used to satisfy payment requests by C.O. Williams to Public Works must be provided. And up to this day, Madam Speaker, they have not responded. If you have nothing to hide, give us information. Madam Speaker, he also says here too that parliamentary representatives on making requests for documentation and answers to matters of the public purse must be facilitated. And this is a man who understands the system, Madam Speaker. And I don't think that we really needed him to tell us this, but we know that. Now, Madam Speaker, he says here, something appears to be strange. Namely, it was recognized that ground condition at specified depth was not suitable due to very poor soil.
Madam Speaker, on a point of order. Madam Speaker,
It says interruptions. I would like to listen to the